Para que sus activos y procesos funcionen de manera segura y eficiente, es necesario contar con diagnósticos en tiempo real, con la correcta integración de datos en línea y con balances confiables. Nuestra amplia experiencia en la industria colombiana nos ha llevado a diseñar soluciones alrededor de estos tres ejes, que buscan facilitarle a usted la toma de decisiones, la gestión de sus activos, el mantenimiento y aseguramiento de su planta. Lo hacemos posible gracias a la experiencia y capacitación de nuestro equipo humano y al respaldo y trayectoria de nuestros aliados tecnológicos.
Si usted o su organización necesitan los servicios de un ingeniero aeronáutico, electricista, electromecánico, electrónico, mecánico, metalúrgico, nuclear o de telecomunicaciones, por ley, él debe presentar su matrícula profesional. Este documento garantiza que el ingeniero se encuentra autorizado para ejercer la ingeniería de su especialidad. Tramite su matrícula ante el Consejo Profesional para poder ejercer su profesión legalmente en Colombia. Utilice su ingenio para crear, innovar y desarrollarse profesionalmente, generando valor al país y a la profesión de la ingeniería.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Estamos en la sala 1 de mantenimiento con la conferencia Modos de fallas, la moneda de la gestión de activos físicos, a cargo de Nancy Regan. Ella es licenciada en Ingeniería Aeroespacial de la Universidad Aeronáutica Embry-Riddle. Es una autoridad líder en mantenimiento centrado en confiabilidad RCM. Su explicación simple y directa de los fundamentos de mantenimiento y confiabilidad muestra a las personas cómo superar los desafíos organizacionales que se interponen en el camino de crear una cultura de confiabilidad efectiva. Nancy, welcome. Go ahead, please.
Good day, everyone. I'm Nancy Regan. I'm delighted to be here with you today, most especially because we have a very important topic to talk about, and that is failure modes. My mentor, John Mowbray, taught us that failure modes, that we manage physical assets at the failure mode level. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we proactively identify them and that we identify them properly. Now, he also used to say that failure modes are the currency of physical assets. So I have some American dollars here today. And if we think about failure modes like this money, and it's not just American dollars, it's any currency. We have small but currency that doesn't mean very much, right? Small currency like a dollar. You know, maybe a dollar will buy you a candy bar in the United States. And then we have fives, and we've got $10 bills, and we've got $20 bills, 50s, and hundreds. So just like failure modes with our equipment, if I were to lose these $2, let's say I went into the supermarket and I lost these two, I was holding them in my hand, but I lost them, it wouldn't matter very much. Now, I don't want to lose money. I'm not in the business of losing money, but if I did, it wouldn't be a big deal. But if I were walking around the supermarket with $200 and I lost these, that would matter way more because I can buy, you know, a week's worth of groceries with this money. So it impacts me more. And the same thing goes for failure modes when it comes to our equipment. And that is why it's so important that we identify them. Because one of the things we can do is once we identify them, we can figure out how each one matters. Now that's very important because it affects failure modes, and how we manage them affects our reliability, what the kind of reliability that we get from our equipment. Now, as physical asset managers, whether we realize it or not, we design our reliability. Reliability is designed, and it's designed both literally speaking, but also figuratively speaking. Now, literally speaking, the kind of reliability that we get from our equipment is largely dictated by the design of the equipment, right? It is what it is. We can't get any more out of a machine than it was designed to do. That's what we often refer to as inherent reliability. But we also figuratively design our equipment's reliability. See, inherent reliability doesn't mean how long something will last without failing. Inherent reliability means how long something will last without failing when it's protected by the right proactive maintenance and other actions, other default strategies that we do for our equipment. So it's not just about proactive maintenance. We have emergency procedures and operating procedures. We have training programs, how we operate our equipment, how often, how infrequently, where we operate our equipment. All of this has a hand in defining the kind of reliability that we get. Now, the quality of these choices that we make for our equipment, all of these choices, the quality is dependent upon the quality of our choices, and the quality of our choices are completely dependent upon our philosophy. Do we have a valid philosophy, or do we have a philosophy about reliability that makes us run around in reactive mode, running from fire to fire? Now, failure modes play a very important role in that. So before we go any further, what I want to do is define what a failure mode is, because within our industry, the term failure mode is used differently amongst people. So it's very important when you're talking to someone that you understand what it is they mean by the term failure mode. When I use the term, I'm talking about what specifically causes functional failure. So for me, a failure mode means the same thing as a failure cause. Now, don't worry about the names. Let's just make sure for purposes of today that we're all on the same page, that I'm talking about what specifically causes functional failure. So what is a failure mode? Well, the way I like to think about it is it's like a road. It's very important to understand things at a foundational level, on a very basic level, because when you do, you can build on that. And it doesn't get any more basic than this, that a failure mode is like a road. And when we proactively identify them correctly and we write them in the correct amount of detail, it puts us on the right road and will lead us to our destination. Now, as responsible custodians, our destination is good proactive maintenance and any other default strategies that we need to do to get the reliability we need from our equipment. Now, I live in Huntsville, Alabama in the United States. So if I want to go to Las Vegas, I need to drive west. If I drive east, I'm never going to get there. And it's the same thing for our failure modes. If we don't write them properly, we're not going to get to where we can make quality choices for our equipment. So some examples, when I say failure mode, I'm talking about things like wear, corrosion, erosion, deterioration, misalignment, dirt builds up. So these common phenomena that happen that we need to manage so that our equipment doesn't break down. But we also talked about stuff other than just proactive maintenance. So there's a lot more that we have to keep in mind as responsible custodians when it comes to failure modes. And I'm talking about things that I learned the term latent condition by James Regan. He is an excellent author and he's wrote several books on human error. I highly recommend them. But in his book, I learned about latent errors. Now, the word latent means it's just kind of lying in wait, and it's waiting for the right moment to kind of pounce on us. Things like we may have vague operating procedures, or maybe we have a mistake in a tech manual. Maybe the tech manual says to install the part this way, but it really should go that way. Maybe our training programs aren't what they need to be. Maybe we don't have the right tools in the field, inadequate design, etc. All of these things, and I have facilitated reliability-centered maintenance analyses where we have uncovered causes of chronic failure because of failure modes like these, and not necessarily the ones that lead us to proactive maintenance. Now, I have an example for you. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to flash something on the screen. I want you to look at it, and then I'm going to immediately take it off the screen. And then I'm going to ask you a question. So here we go. Okay, so what I just showed you was yogurt containers. Now, I love yogurt, and I eat it for dessert every night, and I love lemon meringue yogurt. And sometimes it's not so easy to find. So when I find it, I buy as many as I can. So I went to the store a few months ago, and they had what I thought was the yogurt that I love in stock. So I bought 8 of them, and I got home, and I opened one to eat it that night. And as soon as I opened it, it smelled differently. It didn't smell badly. It just smelled differently. But, I was busy running around, and, so I just got a spoon, and I put a spoonful in my mouth, and right away I was completely turned off because it was actually banana cream yogurt. And I really like fresh bananas, but anything with banana flavoring, like muffins or cake or anything, it's very off-putting to me. Now, I know that this is just yogurt, but I'm using it as a very important example for us in the field of reliability. If you look at these containers, this one is the lemon meringue, and this one is the banana cream. Now, if someone is busy, distracted, tired, not paying full attention because we're human beings, that's what happened to me. I bought this lemon meringue because at first glance, it looks very similar. It's the same color. If you were to take these things off, it essentially looks the same. So I made this very big mistake. Now, like I said, it was a minimal mistake because it was just yogurt. But you can turn on the television, you can surf the internet, and every day you'll find a disaster somewhere in the world that happened because of what is dubbed human error. And unfortunately, a lot of times a person or a technician is blamed for a failure, when the question that I like to step back and ask is, as equipment custodians, did we set everyone up for success? So things like this, where maybe we need to beef up an operating procedure or make a technical manual more detailed, make something error-proof, where James Reason talked about that, where these latent conditions, it's very important that we identify them, and they show up as failure modes. They show up as failure modes when we do reliability-centered maintenance, if we're just doing FMEA or failure modes and effects analysis, if we're doing root cause analysis. In all of those instances, and in many other reliability initiatives, all of these things show up as failure modes. So it begs the question, what failure modes should we be focusing on? Now, if you're doing RCM or you're doing FMEA or any other improvement initiative where you have to identify failure modes, there are 4 criteria that we need to follow. Number 1, has the failure mode happened before? Has the failure mode not happened, but it's a real possibility? And that may be because we're currently managing it. Is the failure mode unlikely to occur, but the consequences are severe? And are we currently managing that failure mode with our current proactive maintenance? So if you're wondering, where do you begin? What failure modes should you even be identifying? Here are the 4 criteria. If you answer yes to any one of these 4 questions, then it is a failure mode that should be analyzed or should be considered. And, to manage failure modes, to analyze failure modes, you don't even have to do a full-blown RCM or FMEA. You can identify failure modes and especially very important ones, and sort out how you should be managing them, even just one by one, if there's an issue in your plant or in your organization. So now that we know what failure modes we should identify, now we have to learn at how detailed do we need to write failure modes. Now this is a reason sometimes failure modes are written in too much detail or in too little detail. And it's a big reason why, for example, RCM analyses fail or failure modes and effects analyses fail, because we didn't get this step right. Now, the general answer as to how detailed should failure modes be written, the general answer is that they should be written in enough detail so that an appropriate failure management strategy can be developed. Now, you may step back and say, well, what does that mean? Well, let me share some examples. Now, you see on the screen, okay, so a failure mode should include a noun and a verb and some other detail if necessary. So you see hydraulic line chafes and hydraulic line chafes. It looks like the same exact failure mode, but when we add some detail to it, it really changes things. So for example, a line could chafe because of normal equipment vibration, but it could also chafe because it is improperly routed. Let's take another example. Oil filter clogs. It could clog just because of normal use, but it could also clog due to gearbox break-in. Similarly, foreign object could enter an aircraft engine inlet during flight or while it's on the ground. So in all three of these examples, the level of detail that we added makes the failure mode completely different. Now you may ask, well, why does this matter? It matters because we have to write our failure modes in enough detail so that we can formulate an appropriate failure management strategy. For example, if we go back to our hydraulic lines that are chafing, if they chafe due to normal equipment vibration, then maybe I need to visually inspect those lines every 25 hours of operation. I need to do a CBM task, a condition-based maintenance task. But if those lines are being improperly routed, it doesn't make any common sense that I would set up a CBM task to inspect them because they're being improperly routed. What I need to do is properly manage that level of detail. And in that case, what I could do is augment my training program to make sure that my technicians are routing them properly. Let's look at our filter example. If an oil filter clogs due to normal use, well, maybe I need to change it on a scheduled basis. But if it's clogging because of gearbox break-in, maybe I need to have a one-time task to change it after the first 50 hours of operation. And then after that, I can go to 500 hours. But you see how the level of detail that we put in the failure mode is what gets us there. Now, in the last example, with foreign objects entering an engine air inlet during flight, well, number one, that's a very plausible failure mode because we know that that has happened. There was a very, I hate to say famous, because famous implies popular, but you may remember there was a plane, a movie was made of it called Miracle on the Hudson. And that's when an aircraft, there was a bird strike simultaneously in both engines, and the airplane had to land on the Hudson River. And it landed safely, and everyone was well. But there's no way to predict or prevent that. Now, just because we can't predict or prevent something doesn't mean we can't manage it. Because this failure mode is managed by having appropriate emergency procedures. I mean, we all, if you fly on an airplane, you accept the risk that an engine could be faulted because of a bird strike. But the way the airlines manage it is by having appropriate emergency procedures. Now, in the case of FOD accumulating in an engine inlet when the aircraft is on the ground, well, that's one reason why on a pre-flight, they inspect the engine inlets for FOD before they start the engine, right? So you can see how when we write our failure modes at the appropriate amount of detail, it leads us to the right task or the right default strategy. In other words, the right failure management strategy. So in the examples that I just showed you, when we first started, we talked about how proactive maintenance has a hand in reliability, but also all of this other stuff. So whether you're doing reliability-centered maintenance or FMEA or any other reliability improvement initiative, there are very likely going to be decisions made that are not just maintenance. Like in the examples that we did, visually inspecting the hydraulic lines every 25 hours, well, that's proactive maintenance. But augmenting the training programs to make sure the lines are routed properly, that's a modification to a training program. So just because it's not maintenance doesn't mean it's not something we have to focus on. And if we know lines are being improperly routed, we need to deal with that. We need to proactively identify it as a failure mode so that we can figure out how we want to manage it. And you know, this brings up another thought. When we first started, I showed you American dollars, right? That failure modes, we can liken it to our currency. But you know, in the world, of course, there's not just the American dollar. We've got British pounds. We've got, this is a dinar from Bahrain. We've got Australian dollars. We've got Norwegian kronas. We've got euros. We've got British pounds. So there are all types of different currency. And that's one of the points I want you to leave. If you can leave with some thoughts, this is one of them. That if failure modes are the currency of physical assets, then it's important to understand that there's different currency when it comes to physical assets. Now, we mentioned that failure modes have to be written in enough detail so that an appropriate failure management strategy can be developed. But we have to balance that, right? They can't be too vague, but they also can't be too detailed. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we're analyzing a diesel engine, and we want to identify the failure modes for the diesel engine. Well, we could just write down diesel engine fails, and that's it. I'm done with my analysis. That was quick and I'm done. But am I? Because when you think about it, if my goal is to is to formulate an appropriate failure management strategy, then I have to write my failure modes in enough detail to be able to get there. So in this example, I would ask, well, what specifically causes the diesel engine to fail? And if my goal is proactive maintenance, then along with my team, I would probably come up with stuff like engine oil deteriorates due to normal use. Engine oil diminishes due to normal use. Cooling fan drive belt wears due to normal use. And starter motor fails. Because each one of these is going to lead me to a solution, right? Maybe for this one, I'm going to change my engine oil every 6 months. This one, I'm going to check the engine oil and I'm going to replenish it as required. In this one, I'll do some CBM. I'll visually inspect the fan drive belt and replace it if it needs it. And with the starter motor, maybe I might just say no scheduled maintenance. Now, this is an interesting one because if we're talking about my car, I run my starter motor to failure. It's a random failure. I know I can't predict or prevent it, and I have roadside assistance. So if it fails, it's not that huge of a deal. But I could, if I wanted to, I could get more detailed here. I could say electrical connections loosen, armature insulation breaks down, solenoid fails, brushes wear. And I could even get more detailed when it comes to my solenoid. I could break that down further. Plunger sticks, coil burns out, and so on. See, I can get super detailed and we can get into what we've heard of as analysis paralysis. It feels like you're in a little failure mode tornado because, oh my gosh, where do I stop? Before you're done with this analysis, you've got hundreds of failure modes, right? But if our goal is proactive maintenance, then we know this is way too much detail. And we know that just saying starter motor fails is an appropriate level of detail. Now, you may be asking, well, okay, that all makes sense, but where do we get the data or where do we get the information to identify failure modes? Now, one thing I want to call your attention to is it's called the Reznikov conundrum. And Dr. Reznikov wrote a paper in the 1950s, and it was specifically about data and reliability-centered maintenance. Now, here's the gist of what he said. And so what you see is a bucket of failure data. And he said, if we have failure data, then it means that there were equipment failures, if that's how we're collecting our failure data. But critical failures are unacceptable. And the most critical ones today in our world, we know we're managing them now, right? We're not letting them happen. So what Reznikov's conundrum says is that what we end up with is a bucket of data about failures that don't really matter very much. And so the conclusion was we have to design a maintenance program for critical items without failure data. And therein lies the conundrum. But within any organization, there's a big piece of, I call it untapped gold. And that is our equipment experts. When you assemble a team of equipment experts, whether you're doing RCM or FMEA or any other improvement strategy that includes the identification of failure modes, one of the best sources of data and knowledge are your equipment experts. These are people who have been in the field for 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. They understand the equipment, the operating environment, the operational tempo. They know how the machine fails, what causes it to fail, how it matters when it fails. They've got all of this information and experience in their brains. And when you assemble them all together and ask them the right questions and record their answers, it's like magic happens. Another byproduct is that you memorialize their information and their experience. So if someone leaves for a different opportunity or they retire, you were able to capture a lot of what they knew. Now, the other thing about this is, in this example, you see there's an operator, a maintainer, someone from the manufacturer, an electrician, a planner, a logistician. You know, not every team is going to have that many people or all of those disciplines. But the point is that not only do they have all of this knowledge, but an operator has different knowledge and experience than a maintainer does, than an engineer does. So when you get all of these perspectives and all of this information to all of this information that they have all together at the same time, what happens is, I mean, you collect data that you may have not even realized that you even had. It's like magic just happens. And I was giving a presentation a couple of months ago to a company, and before mine, someone else was speaking. And what this speaker said is, he said, I'm in awe when I watch maintainers work. And specifically, he was talking about laser alignment. And he said, it's a quote, I'm in awe. And I thought, oh my gosh, he gave me license to now gush about equipment experts. The kind of reliability-centered maintenance that I advocate is a facilitated working group approach. I would never just like take an organization's tech manuals and drawings and do RCM for them. It's very important, if you're going to do that process, that you have the people who know the equipment, who are giving the information and answering the RCM questions. But I don't know, maybe it's because my father was a blacksmith, and I grew up watching him, and he made the most exquisite wrought iron railings. And maybe that's where my appreciation and how I feel, I'm in awe when I see them work, and when they give me the information that they have. It's really quite incredible. So if you're wondering, how do you identify failure modes? A key place to look is with your equipment experts. Now, I also don't want to leave you with the thought that data is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I'd be willing to bet, I'm a betting woman, and I'd be willing to bet these American dollars that you don't have all the failure data that you need to properly identify failure modes. So I hope that you found that helpful and that opened your eyes, and maybe it has given you some ideas for your own self when it comes to failure modes. I would like to share with you that I have a free RCM course, and if you would like to take it, you can just go to that URL and sign up. But I have a request of you, and that is I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers with my YouTube channel. And I just started a podcast, and I'm posting at least weekly videos on there about various reliability issues. So if you're in a subscribing kind of mood, I would be delighted if you would subscribe to my channel. Just go to youtube.com and type in RCM Training Online, and you'll see my page come up. So that's what I have to share today. Another thing that John Mowbray taught us is that time is our most valuable asset as human beings. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. And you chose to spend your time with me today. And for that, I am sincerely grateful. So thank you. And if we have time for questions, I'd be delighted to answer any that you might have.